who has an incredible CV. He didn't start running until he was about 65 when he joined a running club. And now he has an Abbott's World Marathon Major Certificate. That means he's run every big city marathon. Only 6,000 people have done that. He's a member of the 7 Continents Club, a marathon on every continent. Less than 1,200 people have done that. And he's also a member of the Marathon Grand Slam Club, running a marathon every continent and at the North Pole. And only 146 people are a member of that club. So Harry, you're a bit special. Over to you.
Okay. First of all, can you hear me all right? Okay, great, guys. Thanks, Ed. Well, fantastic introduction. And I was kind of thinking who you're talking about. Surely it can't be me. I'm just an ordinary back runner, and I've just been fortunate enough to get around to the different races and participate in marathons and around the world. And certainly pre-COVID, this was still possible. I just now look back and think how incredible the fortunate I have been to be able to get around the world, and particularly at my age. One of the reasons for this presentation is proof that old age is not a barrier to running and competing in marathons. I will not talk about the big city marathons because many of you have done those and quite familiar with them. I will instead talk about what I consider the extreme marathons, the ones down at the South Pole, the North Pole, and Mount Everest. I'll spend a little bit more time on Mount Everest than the others. And then a few, if we have time, a few incidents that have taken place while running. And then at the very end, I'll conclude and take your questions. So that's the idea behind this and the format. You're quite right, Ed, that I did start running at the age of 65. Up to then, I really just went out jogging, ran with my dog. And the day after my final day at the office, my wife and I moved down from Johannesburg to the coast where we retired. And we've been here for 11 years now. And just for those that don't know, Botha is about 50 km north of Durban. Sadly, one often hears of stories about someone who has worked all their lives and then they don't have time to enjoy their retirement, they pass on. And to avoid a similar fate, I thought I needed to be active and to get fit, physically fit. I had several options, one of them being sea kayaking. Living so close to the ocean and overlooking it daily, I thought it was a good idea. But you know, as you watch that ocean from day to day and the sea changes from calm to frightening, I thought rather not. So then my other option was mountain biking. We're very fortunate. We got a place called Holland Trail just up the road from us, 300 kilometers of trails. And I wanted to do mountain biking. I borrowed a bike from my son and it was fun, but I just didn't have the skills for riding a mountain bike. And after falling several times, I just thought that this is not for me. I'm going to break a bone, and I promptly returned the bike to my son. My third option, not far from where we stay, is the local running club. And I thought, you know, at least I won't fall too often there. And I decided to join. And I suppose it was quite understandable when I walked in there one evening, introduced myself and said, I'd like to start running and join your club. It was obvious that I was old enough to be the father to most of the members. and many had difficulty in addressing me by my first name. They were more, sorry, I'm just looking at the time. They were more interested, just catch me again. I was just checking my time, Ed. I'm just a little concerned I was going to be running over. Anyway, so I joined the running club, and I was about to say that I was old enough to be most of the members' father, and they were quite uncomfortable calling me by my first name, and they really wanted to refer to me as Sir or Mr. Anyway, I convinced them that I was just a runner, nothing special. I joined in on the weekly time trials and gradually started running long distances, which led me to being invited to run with the club in a 16K race. It was a challenge, but I managed to finish the race. And being a club member, one gets to meet people with different running abilities, and it was pleasant to run with other runners of the same pace. You know, you could run with and chat and not be out of breath, and I enjoyed that. And one of those runners was looking for somebody to run with purely for a security reason, a female running by herself. She thought it would be safer to run with somebody else, and in this case it was me. She was actually a lot faster than me, but she persevered and ran with me, and in fact she ran with me on the training runs for more than a year. And then after that year, one morning she said to me that her husband had been transferred to Germany and they would be moving there in a few months' time. But how about we run our first marathon together, the Berlin Marathon? I thought, why not? By then I'd run over 10 half marathons, enjoyed them, and I thought, well, that's an excellent plan. So if we can see where we go here. Just give me a minute, guys, while I try and get...
Is the share screen working, Lee?
I'm going to try and do the screen sharing now. Sorry, guys.
Yeah, that seems to be working.
I'm just going to get out of here for a while.
While Harry's sorting himself out, I just sort of mentioned that the mountain biking resonated with me because I tried mountain biking once and I was pretty good on the uphills, very bad on the downhills. And I was doing an event one time and there was an ambulance at the bottom of the hill. And I was sort of going down it with my brakes full on and everyone else was coming flying past me at speed. And I thought, you know what, this is not a good idea.
Guys, I've got a problem here, just again, if you don't mind holding.
Okay, it's no problem, Harry.
I'm not sure if I should leave the meeting, Ed, and then come back.
I don't think that's necessary, Harry. Are you trying to share your browser?
I'm going to go to the slides, guys. I've got quite a few slides I want to do.
Okay. So have you got your presentation up on your local screen?
Yeah, you see, I'm just trying to get to where do I start. I've got the share button here.
Yes. Okay. Then you just need to, when you press the share screen button, if you then just pick up.
Okay, I think I'm getting
there we go.
now.
Yeah, there we got it.
Guys.
That's it. Yeah.
That's better.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Okay. Let me move this away. Okay, guys.
Yeah, all looks good. All looks good.
Okay, okay. Sorry about the delay. Yeah, so that led me to my first marathon, and it was 6 months later, and I clearly remember the excitement of my first marathon, lining up with 32,000 other runners and me wearing my South African flag t-shirt. And it was a lasting memory to be on that start line and to have the streets lined with people. We were never short of music. We had lined music, bands playing all the way as we ran along. Our carb loading and race nutrition worked. That is until the final 4 or 5 kilometers. With my partner coaxing me on, I dug deep and kept on running, but what could be more accurately described as a shuffle. And as the Brandenburg Gate came into view, this became my goal, to keep running. I managed to get that far, but then realized that the finish was still another 500 meters further on. And as hard as I tried and my energy was drained, I slowed to a walk. And as I walked, I thought, gee, I just can't finish my first marathon walking. And my running partner urged me on, and I broke into a jog a little bit faster than the shuffle and eventually into a run. And 100 meters further on, we crossed the finish line together. And in that moment, I became a marathon runner. On my return to South Africa, I often thought of the Berlin Marathon and came to the decision that I must do another one. My wife got used to the moods, my excitement at the prospect of running my next marathon. And then when I came back and I didn't have a marathon to run, the mood changed and I became apparently quite difficult to live with. And she soon realized the only way to get me out of these moods was to say, Harry, go and find another marathon. The other marathons that I did, let me just go back here. Finding the next marathon was the easy part. Gaining an entry I found was very much more difficult. And I wonder how many of you out there have tried getting an entry into London or New York, or not to mention Boston. I've heard of people trying for years and not being successful. I too tried to get entries by making a direct application, but often I'd get that email which said, thank you for your interest, but unfortunately, and that was another rejection. The solution I found was to find a sports travel company that had been allocated tickets, which included a race entry. This worked for many of my international marathons. By this time, I'd heard of the World Marathon Majors, and I had by this time completed 3, Berlin, London, and New York. Boston was next. Entries to the Boston Marathon is restricted to 25,000 runners, and to make it even more difficult, one has to have a Boston Marathon age group qualifying time. And at that time, I fell in the 65 to 69-year-old category, and the qualifying time was 4 hours 15. Well, I was almost a half an hour slower than the required time. I wanted to run this race, but I had the big problem of the qualifying time. And as hard as I trained, I would never be able to make up a half an hour. A few months later, she contacted me and said that worldwide, the Boston organizers had issued 200 what they called invitational entries. South Africa had received 5 of those invitational entries. I was in the queue with several other 100 runners who wanted to run Boston. all I can say is no money was involved, no promises made, but I managed to get one of the 5 entries. What may have contributed to me gaining the entry was that the agent was aware of my age and took pity in me, and thinking that I wouldn't be running much longer. Well, that was 10 years ago. Boston was an amazing experience, but time does not allow me to go into details. One thing though, with about 3 kilometers to go, I realized that the 6-hour cutoff time was fast approaching. The thought of me not finishing in time after having the great difficulty in getting an entry brought a few tears to my eyes. These were camouflaged in perspiration that rolled down my cheek. With great relief, I crossed that finishing line with about 4 minutes and 10 seconds to spare. That's the thin line between success and failure. And so often we find that in business, that if we don't keep on trying, we're going to lose out. So I was very comfortable or satisfied having done that marathon, and now I was looking for something else. I got to hear about the coolest marathon, a race run on mainland Antarctica, a few 100 kilometers from the South Pole. Before long, I'd entered the race and was on my way to the frigid South. This is a marathon run at the bottom of the world near the South Pole. And that's us in the cargo plane being taken down to Antarctica. Just to put in perspective, Antarctica is a continent 1.5 times the size of the United States. And only 50 runners are accepted, mainly due to the logistics and environmental issues. Prior to departure from Punta Arenas, tip of Antarctica, for Antarctica, we had a briefing on what to expect down at Union Glacier, where the race is held, and the rules that must be observed, and the kit inspection. My kit was fine. I had enough warm clothing, but my boots, which I'd used to summit Mount Kilimanjaro with, they were quite warm for that. They didn't think that they would be appropriate for the frigid temperatures down near the South Pole. We climbed aboard this Russian transport plane, which had no windows, as you can see on the sides there. It was all boarded up, and just enough seats for us 50 runners. And the rest of it was used to transport supplies down at the base near the South Pole. We landed on a huge glacier. In fact, that glacier is 1,000 meters thick, and that plane coming in, you can see it's a used plane that carries heavy equipment, tractors, etc., for working down in the Antarctic. And it was one of the smoothest landings I've ever experienced. And interesting, those mountain peaks in the background is 1,000 meters below the ice is where those mountains start. So those are really high mountains. That's our camp down at base camp, and that's there for about 3 months of the year. Once the winter starts, everything is packed away, carried back, and including all waste. There's no waste, not even grey waters left down there, everything removed. And then we were introduced to our route, which is almost a triangle, 21 k's long. And the start, we were all together. But as the faster runners took off, and we were soon left in the background, and eventually I was running all by myself, and you can see this wasteland. It's actually wonderful to be down there to see it. And as we ran, these were our drink stations, and instead of Coke or cold water at the drink station, we were given hot chocolate, hot coffee. And you can see the marshals were well protected. I managed to fill that race, and I really I found that was an amazing experience as well. Having completed a marathon near the South Pole, it was quite natural for me to want to run one at the North Pole. And it took me 3 attempts to actually get to the start line. The first attempt, all the way up into the Arctic Circle, place called Longyear, Behaven, Svalbard. A day before the race, I got sick and I couldn't run. On the second time, the runway cracked, and we had to wait for up to 2 weeks, and then I couldn't wait anymore, and I had to get back home, and I had to go up there for the 3rd time. And unfortunately, in the 3rd time, I managed to run the race. How is it possible to hold an event right there up at the North Pole? First, helicopters fly over the ice floe to find suitable ice. They want to find ice that they describe as mature ice, and that'll carry the weight of the plane. The plane drops fuel and then drops the tractors by parachute, and then the actual workers, most of them ex-military, Russian military people. That gives you an idea of the thickness of the ice. And as the ice moves, it breaks and then pushes up these fissures, as you see there. And they had to use jackhammers. Now we're trying to make a runway for the plane to land, and also that's where part of our route was along those things. There's a tractor bulldozer that had been dropped by helicopter, and these guys had to make a 1,000-meter long runway. One of the problems is that the ocean is moving underneath that ice floe, and it does crack. And when it cracks, it almost sounds like a boom of a gun or a cannon. And that's the end of the runway. They have to then construct a new runway. So this was a problem within one of the years, and then later on I managed to run the marathon. And there we are with the plane coming down. The runway is now safe for us to land. On arrival at the Camp Borneo, we held a brief meeting. They gave us notice that the marathon would start in 2 hours' time, and as it turned out, that would be at 10 o'clock at night. Well, with 24-hour sunlight, that wasn't a problem. If you're running in the middle of the night, according to the clock, you couldn't tell the day if it was midnight or midday. The course consisted of 13 laps, and also again, before long, one gets separated and you're running all along. Quite amazing there that the marshals were all armed and keeping watch over our runners. Polar bears were spotted in the area, so we had to be cautious, not only fight the 42 kilometers of rough terrain, but also constantly be aware of polar bears. One of our runners Very difficult to run down there without with wearing goggles, because the goggles soon got frosted up, and we ran without, and you can see what happened to him. This is quite interesting. People with Garmin watches know that the route is recorded, and there is the laps. You can see, let's take the very bottom one, for example. That's a lap with triangle that we ran. And then by the time you completed it, the whole ice cap had moved. I might have mentioned, but I'll mention it again. In 24 hours, the ice cap moves by 7 kilometers. So if you put something down here tonight, 24 hours later, whatever that is, it's 7 kilometers away. So that's our route. And again, to run the route, we had to make sure that we followed those little black flags. So every 200 or 300 meters, there was a black flag for us to get. I completed that marathon in 10 hours, 53 minutes, as opposed to the one down at the South Pole in about 7 hours, 15. After the marathon, we had time. We went by helicopter up to the geographical north. The camp was made at the North Pole, but then, as I say, it's shifting ice, and then we had to, so we went right up to the North Pole, and everything 0, 0, 0, everything where you look is looking south, and there we circled the earth, holding each other's hands. Now, how to choose the next one? Having run the most southern marathon, one in the Holy Land, the Jerusalem Marathon, the beautiful Venice Marathon, the highest marathon in the world, Mount Everest, became my next goal. At an altitude of 5,364 meters, the start of the Mount Everest is the highest marathon in the world. Up there is only 50% oxygen compared to sea level, so moving around is quite difficult. And each year, the marathon is held on the 29th of May to commemorate the historical ascent of Mount Everest by Tenzin Sherpa and Sir Edmund Hillary on the 29th of May, 1953. I convinced my new running partner, Laura, to join me on what turned out to be an adventure of a lifetime. It did not take much arm twisting, as she had run a marathon on each of the 7 continents herself. We flew from to Kathmandu in Nepal, where we met fellow race competitors. And to get to base camp, it's either a 12-day trek, to get to Lakla, where the trek to Mount Everest starts. It's either a 3 or 4 day trek to get to Lakla. You can go by bus, or you can fly. Most people fly, but the runway is situated between mountain peaks at an elevation of almost 3,000 meters. And only the most skilled pilots are allowed to land there. Once committed to landing, there's no possibility of aborting and then coming around for a second attempt. It's either land or crash. The control tower is manned by 3 traffic controllers, and they give the go-ahead for the pilots to take off from Kathmandu and come into Lakla. And it's rated as one of the 10 most dangerous airports in the world. And it seemed to be hardly taken off when our pilot was preparing himself to come in for the landing. And all of us were concerned, and I was tightening my seatbelt knowing that we're going to land on a runway that is only 500 meters long. We were successful, but they were not. As you can see, that at the end of the runway is the side of the mountain, and that plane went straight into the side of the mountain. Our trek to base camp took 12 days over these swinging bridges, and each day as we got higher and higher, it became more difficult. The Sherpas reminded us to keep on drinking. Past 4,000 meters, there was no more vegetation. On our second last evening of our trek to base camp, our head Sherpa pointed out the rainbow, which looked like a circle around the moon. And he said, we're going to have snow. And his prediction was quite correct. On the way to base camp, memory of those people that had died in the climbing Everest. Talking about the snow, that's us now just approaching base camp. And just think, doing all of this to run a marathon, trekking for 12 days to get to the start of a marathon. Thick snow, and that's our base camp. It was decided that because of the weather conditions, we couldn't start the marathon from Mount Everest Base Camp, so we had to go back to Gorok Shep, which was about 6 kilometers away, and that took us 5 hours to actually get to Gorok Shep. 29th of May dawn, I looked out my window to see beautiful blue skies. And our route was to run down in the valleys to Namche Bazaar for the final, for the 42 Ks. And our route, as you can see at the various distances, at the altitudes, Laura and myself bearing a South African flag, the Nepalese, the top runners were Nepalese, and they took off as if they were running on a tar road. And no sooner they'd gone, but they'd left a trail for us to follow. For the first 3 hours, we didn't deviate from the route. That's our route. That's where we're running a marathon. But I did have time, as I got further down, to glance at the beauty. The bright sunlight, and everything's so bright. One of the runners lost his glasses. He looked around for it for a short time, and then he gave up. And in a very short while, he came down with snow blindness, and he had to be evacuated by helicopter to be taken out. I made good progress with my running shoes, and I had these tungsten tips on my running shoes, and they were good up in the icy conditions, but they were a bit of a problem later on. And in the early afternoon, I was calculating if I was going to make the cutoff time at 6 p.m. at one of the villages. So we pushed on, and fortunately, I made it within 15 minutes to spare. Now, I no sooner left this little village, and then my wonderful tungsten tips running shoes slipped on the rock, and I fell very hard. I got up. People helped me, though. I did a quick check. I was fine. My arms and side of my face a bit sore, but I carried on. And as I approached the aid stations, the marshals looked at me and said, "You're going to have to take off." Guys, I'm looking at my time. How am I doing time-wise?
You can carry on. It's
Okay,
fascinating.
guys, I see I'm up to 30 minutes. So I'll just go through the slides quickly.
Harry, we're loving it, so please don't panic.
Okay, quickly, my last few points was I was circled by wild dogs these are incidents while out training wild dog in the Chobe Game Reserve. Another morning run, I shared the road with a bull elephant near Victoria Falls in Zimbabwe, a common sight, so I shouldn't have got too excited. For a short while, I got lost in the Kalahari Desert, sunset, and I misjudged because of the really sandy conditions. And then in British Columbia, while running, I came across wolves in the distance. So yeah, so I had quite a few interesting experiences. And guys, I think that's about it for me. I'm really, again, concerned about your time. But again, just to sum up, again, age, not a problem. I retired when I was 65. I ran my first bullet marathon in Berlin at the age of 67. I completed the 7 continents at the age of 72, and I ran a marathon in both North and South Poles at the age of 76. And I completed my world marathon majors at the age of 78. At the age of 80, I plan to run a marathon down in Cape Town. So that's my story, guys. And again, my apologies for running over time.
Harry, that was